That's a pretty rousing song. So here you have...
That's the song of the Finnegan's Wake.
Right. And we have the house castle, which is the visual location of Humphrey Chimpton Earwicker and his family living in the castle, I guess. It could be all kinds of people living there. But so the visual part is the castle, but the acoustic part is this song, Finnegan's Wake. So Joyce has everything happen in the castle, and everything is heard in the song, Finnegan's Wake. So he takes these two little fragments and builds the history of the universe. So I'm going to read the lyrics.
The archetype of the fall and the resurrection in this one.
Right.
So.
Like Tim Finnegan is climbing up a ladder and he falls off the ladder, and he's a workman, and that causes his death. So here's the way the song lyrics go. Tim Finnegan lived in Walkin Street, Walkin. That's like walking. A street is for walking, so it's like Hendiades. One by means of two. Tim Finnegan lived in Walking Street, a gentle Irishman, mighty odd. He had a brogue, both rich and sweet, and to rise in the world he carried a hod. You know, he delivered things, or maybe it was like brick stuff, building mortar. You see, he'd a sort of a tippler's way, which meant he drank. But for the love for the liquor, poor Tim was born. So he's born for the love of liquor. To help him on his way each day, he'd a drop of the crather every morn. Then the chorus, whack full the da, now dance to your partner. Whack full the da, now dance to your partner. Round the floor your trotters shake. Bend an ear to the truth they tell ye. We had lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. And the next lyric. One morning, Tim got rather full. His head felt heavy, which made him shake. He fell from a ladder, and he broke his skull. And they carried it home, his corpse to wake. Rolled him to the wake. But it just says they carried him home, his corpse to wake. That embeds the idea that he's going to wake up. Rolled him up in a nice, clean sheet and laid him out upon the bed. A bottle of whiskey at his feet and a barrel of porter at his head. His friends assembled at the wake, and Widow Finnegan called for lunch. First she brought in tea and cake, T-A-Y, tea and cake. Then pipes, tobacco, and whiskey punch. Biddy O'Brien began to cry, quote, such a nice clean corpse, did you ever see? Tim of Ream, oh, why did you die? End of Biddy's quote. And then Paddy McGee says, will ye hold your gob, said Paddy McGee. I guess he's telling Biddy to shut up. Now, Biddy the hen is it's Belinda the hen. Sometimes she's called Biddy, though, I think, in the Finnegan's Wake. The hen finds the letter. Then Maggie O'Connor, there's your Maggie. Then Maggie O'Connor took up the cry. Quote, oh, Biddy, says she, you're wrong, I'm sure. Biddy punched Maggie. Biddy gave her a belt in the gob. Remember, Paddy McGee said, will you hold your gob? Will you hold your tongue or mouth? Biddy gave Maggie a belt in the gob and sent her sprawling on the floor. Then the war did soon engage. 'Twas woman to woman and man to man. Shillelagh law was all the rage, and a row and a ruction soon began. Mickey Maloney ducked his head when a bucket of whiskey flew at him. It missed, and falling on the bed, the liquor scattered over Tim. Now the spirit's new life gave the corpse my joy. So now the spirits gave the corpse new life. So now the spirit's new life gave the corpse my joy. Tim the Trojan from the bed, crying, will ye wallop each girl? No, maybe crying, will ye? Why? I'm not sure. Crying, will ye wallop each girl and boy? Thundering Jesus, do you think I'm dead? And that's the end. Now, why is this noise coming in? I've got silence this stuff here. I think I did it. So,
Finnegan break. Yes, why are we doing the Finnegan break in the Zappa thing? Well, because on the freak out list, Frank Zappa named James Joyce as one of the people contributing to make the music, his music the way it is. And he says, please don't hold it against them. So James Joyce is mentioned as one of his big influences. And there are two aspects that, or three aspects, I think, that can explain this. On the one side, James Joyce wanted to be actually a musician. He was not into being a writer. And he was a tenor, and he composed, and his father was also a musician. And he was an impresario, and he played and studied and played music all his life. And there are thousands of allusions to lyrics in his work, in all of his works. Many of the verses or the phrases or the dialogues are actually texts of lyrics that he also changes. He makes all types of changes on the words on the text, but many are songs. And because
can I come in? Let me come in. So I got disconnected. So what are you guys talking about? What happened while I was gone?
Well, I just said that there are some aspects of Joyce that are very important for any musician. And one is that Joyce actually wanted to be a professional musician. He didn't want to become a writer, and he studied and played music all his life. And he used a lot of lyrics as part of his compositions. And because these texts were supposed to be sung, there is a lot of rhythm and musicality in many of his work. And he was also a musician, so he has this sense of musicality, of rhythm in the text. And this is very ironic because this is something Ian does all the time. He gives us lyrics to listen to that have some ironic message there. And he's always speaking of this is the new song. And Joyce talks about the Emerald Canticle. And he also made some poems called chamber music, because he was very aware of the music of language. Language has a rhythm, and his characters, sometimes because he's just presenting what the critics call the stream of consciousness of each character, to know who's talking, you have to see the rhythm. Like Analia Purabel, they say she has a faster rhythm, like taka 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 taka, and things like that are very musical. That's why he said, if you don't get something in the Finnegan's Wake, just read it aloud, because then you hear it and you feel this rhythm in the words, the cadence of the words. Then there's also the aspect of the censorship that both had to fight against with the Ulysses and Zappa. And the love for the music, Joyce quotes all music, all genres, jingles, sounds, effects, everything is there in his work. So I see any musician can see that in Joyce. And this is not a surprise that somebody like Zappa would mention Joyce as an influence. And in an interview, they asked him why would he mention him as an influence. And Zappa said, well, I can't say I've read anything Joyce all the way through. No, I can say that I've ever read anything by James Joyce all the way through. But the few pages I looked at, I saw it and said, no, there's a real guy. It doesn't take much.
There's a real guy.
On me.
Say that again. It doesn't take much. What was the last line? Doesn't take much.
To have an influence on me.
Right.
And they also have in common that they were both for sexual freedom, and they presented this type of what people saw as obscenities in their work. And on the 2nd of February, that's Bob's birthday and Joyce's birthday. It's going to be next week, so in a way this is already a celebration, an homage to Joyce. And we could talk about how in many ways Zappa and Joyce had similar agendas. In what were they were doing. That is also something that Ian said. Everything was made to entertain Bob, and Bob thought everything was about him. But Ian said, no, it's not that, but it's that everything is flowing to Bob, like a river. The river runs in the wake. So here is the wake for dummies version.
Well said.
Would you like to say something?
Yeah, that's.
I have a link.
You're waiting. Yeah, go ahead, Bert.
No, I have a link of a connection to Bob, Marshall McLuhan, Zappa, and Joyce, is that they're all great, but Bob is the greatest improviser. And I just read something last week. I was reading some of my notes that Northrop Frye said that McLuhan was the best improviser he ever heard. And Zappa was really good in improvising. That was how all of his concerts were really live, so he could improvise and experiment. And then when I think of what I've read from Finnegan's Wake and read Finnegan's Wake, it's like improvisation on paper to me, because the word, it just goes everywhere, but it's taking you somewhere, but not really, but it is, So that's my link.
And you're saying I'm the greatest improviser? Did you just say that?
Yes. If you look at all, if you listen to all of his early radio shows and now just experience this now, Bob is the great improviser, and that's something that we all can learn to improvise on everyday life, because that's what Bob does when you're on the show. He takes time for everybody.
Right, and you know what I did, Bert? I improvised a new environment. So I go on the radio, and I have to make myself entertaining, appealing. McLuhan says, that which pleases teaches. So a teacher has to please, loosen up the audience before they'll take anything in. You have to be pleasing or entertaining. So I go on there, building on what Bob Marshall had developed in this way ahead of everybody on the conspiracy stuff, and a comprehensive quadraphenic presentation of all different schools of conspiracy thinking, you know what I mean? A mosaic for people. He's not representing one point of view. So then I come in to build on that once he's fired by Adam Vaughan, who is now, a power behind the scenes in Canada's Prime Minister office, with Justin Trudeau, the son of the guy who hung out with Marshall McLuhan. That's Prime Minister Trudeau, 40 years ago. So I had to improvise things. So release the files. You know, the myth that somebody for the people would get into the secret archive and release everything for everybody. Well, that's what I acted out. But I see now that I improvised a radio show. Then I improvised being in New York City. And then I improvised going to Hawaii. And then I had to come up with something else. It's one long conversation, one long music, right? One long piece. You got to keep coming up with new stuff. So then I improvised non-physical. I brought him in. Hey, look at this. How about this, guys? Do you like this next little piece I'm going to play? And his voice comes in. It's an environmental improvisation. I'm just realizing that. It's pretty good, based on Bert's eulogy, or whatever you call it, homage. I realized I improvised environment. And then we improvised RNA drops, which we didn't even know. See, the great humor of it is when RNA drops started to be known and people started to buy it, Chad writes to me, do you know anything about these drops? I write back, no. And then he writes to me, are you taking it? Yes. You know, we came in, we improvised a strange relationship to the drops from the beginning. It's pretty neat. Great way of marketing. Yes, I am
this famous stream of consciousness, the river run. It's like a process of what we do now, the whole streaming. Everybody's streaming and everybody's becoming addicted to this streaming of information, of TV series, of podcasts.
Improvisation. And you're right.
Conversations, music.
Right, and Zappa is a radical improviser because what qualified specialist musician would admit that when they go and perform their solos, they make it up? Nobody ever admitted that. You had to pretend you had a skill.
Yes.
Or the Kings would lop your head off. You know, you had to pretend you had something. And Zappa admits, and it was quite bizarre 30 years ago when he was saying this, I just make it up. And nobody could believe that he did it because it was so good. Well, nobody can believe that I improvised Ion. Nobody can believe that Carol improvises her medical response to people. That's what's so incredible about her medical show. You hear someone improvising a response to unforeseen medical problems.
Yes, and
go ahead.
You are all creating this wake in progress. There is this concept of the conceptual continuity of the whole thing, the whole work that then links to the work of others. And Joyce arrived to this mastery of the phonetic Kabbalah, of the language of the alchemist. And Zappa is the master of the instrument, of the improvisation that the conversation takes us to the nowhere, to the now here, because the music is happening in the now.
Yes. Now here, that's right.
This moment, and I think what Zappa was doing with this remixing and recording and replay of all his work is very similar to what Joyce is doing with the whole civilization, with all myths. They're all remixing all these many songs.
The electric environment uses everything for its content. The electric media, from movies to radio to television and computers, absorbs and spits out all previous media. So Joyce and Zappa, to mime what was going to become the end of a meme, had to contain everything in their art. They had to absorb everything. And it's called, Egyptian pharaoh modality. But that's the point. They had to include everything because the electric media was doing that. Anyways, right in front of everybody.
Yes, and it's like in the Tempest, also more thundering by Shakespeare. There is a magician, Prospero, I think.
Prospero.
He's a master of using illusion to manipulate everybody or the situation, the environment. So that's the pornography Ion was talking about. All the medias are like these Prospero illusions that are going to take us to this moment of the new cloud.
Before the real cloud shows up, Ion.
Yeah, the tempest before the calm, or how do you say that?
Tempest before the calm, before the storm.
The tempest
means a
before...
The tempest.
No,
the tempest before the tempest squared. Hey, it's the tempest before the tempest squared, because tempest means storm. So there always was a storm in human experience, just like the Phoenix Wake begins with the battle on the second page, and then the Android beam replays the storm. So it's the tempest squared. Now note what do we have on the tiny note chart? The tempest, that play, and its character Prospero are the main guys in the Dobbs quadrant. Did you notice that? I have that. I present myself as Prospero. And Henry
Yes.
You see, your magnitude. You're the biggest Maggie. You are the magnitude.
Yes, I'm the biggest Maggie. And you're a mere pornography. You're coming up with interpretations of me that are predicting what I did, what I already did, but you're the simulation of it. You come up with the idea before I tell you that it's already there.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I just really see it. And in the Tempest, Shakespeare is a little like the Android meme, because he's quoting sometimes word by word many different authors, but before that was not seen as plagiarism. It was a type of homage. And Zappa and Joyce do that a lot, this quoting of different types of music, and all myths, all stories, like the Android, everything is in the book.
Now, I went out to my garage to get this. This is the Medium as a Massage, apparently one McClone book that Roxy doesn't have. But on page 120, which runs up against 122, McClone opens page 120 with listening to the simultaneous messages. He's talking about James Joyce. So James Joyce, listening to the simultaneous messages of Dublin, James Joyce released the greatest flood of oral linguistic music that was ever manipulated into art. I want to point out the oral linguistic music. In a way, it's hendiades. Oral. Why would you say oral linguistic music? You can say oral music, but it's got linguistic in there. That covers everything, all forms of expression, manipulating art. So he released the greatest flood of oral linguistic music, which Zappa tried to do in music per se.
Yes.
Joyce did it with the book, and Zappa tried to do it with his recordings. The greatest oral, a lot of talk, Civilization Phase 3, a lot of playing with languages. There's this great line where he says, you don't even know your own language. He's making fun of the people who can't speak their own language, and it's music. And, he called, linguistic music would be sprechstimme, the talking song, right? If you took linguistic as literally the mouth. But it's a great statement. Listening to the simultaneous message of Dublin, so the environment of Dublin, Joyce turned it into the greatest flood of oral linguistic music. So Zappa, listening to the global village or the global theater of media, turned it into a oral linguistic music manipulated into art. It's a great line. So then, after after that, there's a great quote from Finnegan's Wake, and it says, the prouts, or poets, the prouts who will invent a writing there ultimately is the poeta. So the humans, the prouts, who will invent a writing there ultimately is the poets, or the poeta. Still more learned, who discovered the raiding, R-A-I-D-I-N-G there originally. That's the point of eschatology. That means the ultimate mystery landscape. That's the point of eschatology. Our book of kills, based on the book of Kells on one level, that's the point of eschatology. Our book of kills reaches for now in so-and-so many counterpoint words. What can't be coded can be decoded if an ear-eye sees what no eye-ear grieves for. Ear is before, E-R-E. What can't be coded can be decoded if an ear-eye, meaning yes, eye, sees what no eye-ear, or before, grieves for. Now, the doctrine obtains. So this is what Joyce is saying, what his ideal, his structural guiding principle. The doctrine obtains. We have occasioning cause. Think of Ion talking about temporary bigger ground ratios of causes. We have occasioning cause, causing effects, and affects occasionally recausing alter effects. That's Joyce describing how he wrote his book, and that's Zappa, how he made his music, and then Ion acting it out. Did you get that?
Yes, actually.
Yeah. Go ahead.
This gargantuan creativity of all these artists is the pornography. The pornography before the real environment that is coming.
Yes. Pornography.
It's the ice cream.
That's right.
The representation of the above environment.
Now, let me read. This page is pretty important. So now another big paragraph McLuhan writes. So he's making the big summary statement. James Joyce is in the wake, or in Finning's wake, making his own Altamira cave drawings. So McLuhan's saying that Joyce was making cave drawings, which were meant not to be seen, but to act on the world invisibly, like ESP. So Joyce is, in Finning's wake, making his own Altamira cave drawings of the entire history of the human mind in terms of its basic gestures and postures during all the phases of human culture and technology. So all the figures and gestures of the mind are responding to grounds of changes in culture and technology. As his title indicates, Joyce saw that the wake, like the death, the end of human progress, can disappear again. Or it can mean the wake of a ship, just the ongoing inventions and effluence and flow, river run of what's coming off the back of the ship, the wake. So as his title indicates, Joyce saw that the wake of human progress can disappear again into the night of sacral or auditory man. Sacral means a sense of sacred environment, whereas literate man is profane. He's detached. He doesn't care about the environment as much as the primitive man. So Joyce saw that the wake of human progress can disappear again into the night of sacral or auditory man. The Finn cycle of tribal institutions can return in the electric age. But if again, says McLuhan, then let's make it a wake, kill them off, or a wake, or both. So kill them off, or just be aware of what's going on, or do both, killed off and be aware. Joyce could see no advantage in our remaining locked up in each cultural cycle as in a trance or dream. He discovered the means of living simultaneously in all cultural modes while quite conscious. See, that's quadrophenia. So Zappa, he discovered the means to engage all kinds of music while quite conscious. Dobbs discovered the means of talking to any idiot that called in any form of individualistic eccentricity while remaining quite conscious. I cite
that's also your DJ. You mix all genres.
DJing. All genres. No one has ever played cosmic Mozart and then played Shelley Faber singing Johnny Angel. No one has ever dared to mix that. That is obscene.
Yes, but that's the way.
Yes, that is the way, and that's Zappa. Yeah.
Yes, and there have been some efforts to make catalogs of all the allusions, all the quotations, all the allegories to music in the work of Joyce, but it's so much that nobody has until now arrived to do this catalog.
You say they haven't done a musical catalog? There's not a musical catalog?
Well, they're trying. There are some people making this type of catalogs and all the songs that are listed, all the allusions, all the allegories to music, to sound. But until now, nobody has a final list because so much.
Too much. It's really, they don't recognize every song is in there, and half the stuff they're projecting, but that's included. So when I said the other day there are about 50,000 books written on Joyce, it's called the Joyce industry. Well, there are hundreds of books like the following: Shakespeare in Joyce. There'll be a whole book of every variation of Shakespeare that Joyce put in Ulysses, Finneg's Wake, and the other books. Then they'll do Dante. Then they'll do Jonathan Swift. There's many books taking some famous artist and showing how it's riddled through Finneg's Wake or Ulysses.
Or the Bible, or the Emerald Tablets.
Yes. And religions and the Book of the Dead and Madame Blavatsky's Isis Unveiled. So there is the best book of this is the Annotations of Finneg's Wake, put together by Roland McHugh, who followed all the critics for decades, noting what they would find, and then picked like the top 3 interpretations for every line. But he has a great inventory of music and everything. He looked at all the different inventories in different books and then put it in one book. So he's the best for looking at it all when you're reading it, when you read through it. It's called Roland McHugh's Annotations to Finneg's Wake. Roland McHugh. And I think
in a way, I think.
Let me just say this. There's a McHugh who's a character in either Ulysses or Finneg's Wake or both. The name McHugh. You find some Joyce scholars maybe are Joyce scholars because their name is in the book. It's a family tradition. They identify with their name being in the book. So what were you going to say? Go ahead.
Yes, but Zappa was aspiring to do this with the music. What Joyce did with the words, this amazing catalog of all music.
Right. Now, you can make a case. It's a debate. I used to ask Eric McLuhan, which came first, the sound or the eye or the ear. Occasionally, McLuhan would say the ear was the ground, but he was an eye man in the end, sort of. So the battle between which is the beginning, eye or ear. Now, we could say tactility and other levels are there, but just taking the simple battle, is it the eye or the ear? I asked him in 1986, which came first, the eye or the ear? And he says, well, they're still working on that. There's still an ongoing debate, and there'll be a debate forever. But you can say, can one, as Frank Zappa, include all sounds by playing all the sounds? Or Finneg's Wake, which is an eye phenomenon, because there's no ground and the way he juxtaposes everything, does Joyce evoke more music than Zappa? Or more music than the radio or the internet, YouTube? Which way is the way to evoke everything? Through the eye or the ear? Like Cage tried to do in Oratorio, John Cage. That's an ongoing debate. And it seems to favor the eye. So you got on page 52, television kills telephony in Brothers World, but the eyes demand their turn. So they're going to try to do it. Let them be seen. See, so for literate man, the book makes it. For tribal man, Zappa would win, I think. You know, the ear, the bias determines who's the winner. But does the book include more than Joyce? I mean, more than Zappa? Because of the way his method of using the fun.
In a way, both Zappa and Joyce were mystics, but mystics in the sense it had before, because the mystic experience in antiquity was not only with the religare, the reconnection, the religion. It was a tactile experience. They would do rites. They would take substances. They will dance. They will speak. They will get in touch with this thingness. And in a way, this ecstasy was the thing that was the initiation, like in the Eleusinian mysteries, which sounds like Ulysses. And in the Ulysses, it's like a man who wants to get some, I think, kidneys or something like that for breakfast, lives the whole Odyssey in one day. So it's like the normal guy has some experience that shakes his world, and then he becomes the mythic hero. And when Joyce takes the apostrophe from the Finnegan's wake,
the apostrophe,
he makes the singular into plural, like everybody's Finnegan.
Right.
And Zappa has a song called Apostrophe. Maybe we should.
He has an album called Apostrophe.
Yeah,
we should play. Yeah, we'll play Apostrophe.
We should
now, here's a couple of.
Play it because it's a big thing.
We will.
Just to remove that.
Well, now you're getting into the way I like to talk. You're getting into the way I like to. You're mixing into Joyce, Wake, McLuhan, all of it, and myself. So, what you said so far,
the initiation.
The initiation.
For the following.
McLuhan, let's do this. So, McLuhan, in an essay, writes unpublished essays, writes about the two kinds of secret societies, the two mystical traditions, and they're called the Manichaean or Gnostic traditions. So he talks about how T.S. Eliot uses one or the other, and Joyce uses one or the other, and Lewis uses one or the other. So what's the difference? One is moral uplift through sort of detachment and not getting involved in the tribal rituals, leaving the society, withdrawing from it, and rising up to a higher state, an exalted state. That's called vertical symbolism in mysticism. The alternative is not to withdraw, but to plunge yourself into the society, into the mystic rites, into the participation, into the Eleusinian mysteries, and obliterate yourself in the ricocheting of the mirrors of experience. So there are two kinds of obliterating yourself. You can rise up and get rid of your ego and some transcendent state, or you can just get downtown and have a week-long Saturday night and lose yourself, lose your ego in the ricocheting situation, and that's called horizontal symbolism. So these were two mystical traditions based on that life was a fallen condition, and it's fucked up, and you've got to get out of life. You've got to kill yourself in some way. So the Gnostics they began with the premise that it was a fallen world. So then Christ comes along and says, no, it's not a fallen world. It's a glorious world. Ion would agree with that. But Ion also subtly recommends withdrawal at certain points. But now we come to 20th century religion, and the evergreens, what was unique about the evergreens, they were the first medium that did not emphasize vertical symbolism. They almost didn't recommend horizontal symbolism, but they did say the body is sacred. They made a big deal of using your senses to transform yourself, not withdraw into abstract meditation, though that's a kind of sensory life, but that's a proprioceptive, inner, abstract, multidimensional, etheric exploration of yourself. But what was new about for mediums who always had this lofty idea of divine, get access to your divine, lofty self, so they tended to be vertical symbolism, especially in the literate world. The Gutenberg Galaxy favored withdrawal from the world, like the monks and the monasteries, with a visual bias. So Gutenberg Galaxy emphasized vertical symbolism. But once you got into the 20s and 30s, and what Wyndham Lewis called the dithyrambic or dancing robotic spectator, the horizontal symbolism took over in the 20th century, the orgiastic, the scenes of the cities in those documentaries of the 20s. So the orgiastic gets mad at the Christian priest moralists of the vertical symbolist school, who had the advantage during Gutenberg Galaxy. But when you get in the Marconi Galaxy, the orgiastic, the multi-level drug-taking and exploring horizontal symbolism has the advantage. So you have these two modalities expressed between the Gutenberg Galaxy and the Marconi Galaxy. McLuhan said that Joyce maneuvered between both of them. And so that was the wise maneuver. What?
In Greek, mystes means both mystic and secret agent. And
right.
That's Bob.
Exactly.
You are both types of mystic.
Yes, this
revelator.
Right. Because the secret agent is in the ivory tower, watching secretly. He may be mingling in the crowd, but he's faking involvement. So he's operating sort of from the vertical symbolism. That's from the ivory tower. But the other method is to become an activist and get in there in the demonstrations and stir up shit like the FBI would do. They just infiltrate groups and cause the terrorism, the radical actions. So yeah, there's two kinds of provocateur situation. The problem for the elites over the last, say, 50 years was the vertical school was weak and the horizontal school was weak because people were becoming tactile interplay. They were doing both left hemisphere and right hemisphere. And the global population has tried to express that. The people in their rock music, in their pop culture have tried to express, well, I'm neither. Like they'll go, like, what's his name? Bono. Who's the main guy in U2? Is his name Bono? He runs orgiastic. Yeah, Bono runs orgiastic, big, huge festival rock shows with media overload, and then goes and visits George Bush and tries to have some practical social agenda. So he goes to the ivory tower of the White House, but at the same time mingles with the hoi polloi in the clubs. So the population is more and more adopted what Madonna said. Okay, so I contradict myself. So what? I'm more than one person. So when the population started to become quadrophenic, the elites couldn't use one school against another because the population was more and more becoming both schools, and then you got both bodies. Now, there was going to be one more point there. So you've got the two schools. The evergreens are the first medium to emphasize the body and in predicting what Ion says. Ion includes the quadrophenic plus the detached plus the involved, depending on who he's talking to. There's probably no evidence of a teacher having so many different responses to whatever's presented to it as Ion. He's a whole encyclopedia of contradictory and frustrating responses to whatever you're presenting. You hear a lot of wisdom from Ion, then you come in and start asking a question, and Ion tells you to basically fuck off. You, unfortunately, don't get the answers this time. And then someone else comes in, and Ion just slowly gives the answer. You never know how Ion's going to react to the caller. So it's not the old-fashioned consistent. Philosophers and thinkers in the Gutenberg Galaxy tried to be consistent. The chaotic horizontal symbolists aren't necessarily consistent. They encourage disruption. So
the mystic is the initiate, and also music comes from this mystic. So we have
I would add this,
the road of
in the 7. What?
Yes.
Your last word. What were you saying?
That the mystic has like the function of revealing this thing that he gets from the thingness that not everybody sees, not everybody hears.
Right.
And they also have like a higher agenda. It's like they're not only
there it is.
The perfection of themselves, but of the environment. They're affecting the whole environment and everybody.
Okay, now think of that. The higher agenda is the vertical school of transcendence, but the horizontal agenda is to recognize you're inside an environment. You can't escape the world of mortar, and so you try to manipulate it or make an art form out of it. So you're transcending, and yet you're forced to be involved. So you see that in the Emerald Tablets. Thought is being separate from everybody, being a Rai guru more than anybody else, telling them, pointing them to make this discipline, retreat, separate yourself from the tribe and move for the ascendant vertical position. But at the same time, there's all this advice of how to live in the crowd that the Emerald Tablet gives you about, hey, you're up against dark brothers and mafias and little men that'll kill the shit out of you if you're not careful. You know what I mean? So both approaches are offered by thought. Interacting in society and engaging the hoi polloi, while secretly having little classes where you help people withdraw from their hoi polloi.
Yes, and
you see
sorry.
Yeah, let me say this. So you see how the media environments act out this dilemma that goes back before media, just humans in a tribe, in a group. What does the ascended person do with this tribe of people he's interacting with? I remember, I think it's in the movie The Black Rose, the little dwarf shaman in this Canadian Indian culture, he lives outside the tribe. He lives in a little tent off in the woods, and he's by himself, and he's a nut. But he's the shaman they've got to come to, but he lives by himself. You now have visual space and acoustic space in different media environments symbolically act out the dilemma. So the Android meme itself is acting out the battle between the vertical school and the horizontal school in its own manipulation of imagery. It's being mimed by the Android meme, this dilemma. And that's what Joyce is trying to show, where George Steiner says that Joyce is trying to have the language tell its own story. Zappa is trying to have music tell its own story by having music tell what parts it programs, what its octaves do, what's the effect on people that music as an organism knows it has. So Zappa is trying to let music tell the story.
Yes, and we see how both had this higher agenda, and it's transforming all of the immigrants, all of the groupies, all of the forestlings.
Right. Now, here's a point. Zappa says in his Rolling Stone 1968 interview, "We are not entertainment." In other words, he's separating himself from the hoi polloi. He's being a vertical symbolist. He says, we have something to teach you, something you should learn, like in his Life magazine article. If you're dancing up in that orgiastic disco and having a great time, would you listen if someone came along and said, hey, buddy, a society that needs all the friends that it can get using this force, what do you think of that? Do you think that's viable? And he says, would you listen? So you got Zappa denying his peopleness, is just another musician, but on Freakout, he says the lyrics to, I don't remember which song it was, but he says, yeah, I'm telling you this and criticizing that, but maybe I'm just a musician and it's not my place to tell you what's going on. It's not my place to make songs with political or spiritual messages. He includes himself as just another Joe in the crowd. You know, maybe I'm just here to, if you take the lyrics as Zappa's own thoughts or words, he could just be miming a dull musician who can't figure out how to transcend and how to declare themselves as not entertainment, so they just say, maybe I shouldn't criticize you, I'm just here to be an entertainer. So he has the dialectic right there in his beginning albums of the two types of mysticism. And then Ion comes in, not Manichaean, it includes the two traditions, but says, you don't need to transcend yourself. You are not, it's not a fallen world. The world's not broken. And he does a lot on that idea. And he gets you to relax on thinking that you have to get out of this prison you've found yourself in.
Yes, like you said, if you're not happy in this world, you're not going to be happy in other worlds because you're taking yourself. It's not the world, it's you.
Right. So yeah, go ahead. Maybe.
No, I was going to say maybe we listen to the apostrophe, but you have more to say.
Oh, I have another thing about apostrophe. There's several meanings. Apostrophe is technically a form of verse or creation where you address an animal or an inanimate form. Let me just bring that up. You're addressing, I would say in the 70s, you would be addressing the Android memes. So apostrophe, and this is the example of Zappa, who would claim that he hasn't even got any special literate education other than in music, coming up with this very obscure term of what an apostrophe is. Let's see. So you have the traditional apostrophe is a punctuation mark. Now I've got to find the other meaning.
I have the impression that he really knew a lot, but he never wanted to sound like an intellectual or pedantic.
Because he was in the crowd. He didn't want to stand and be like the ivory tower mystic. And even Bob Dylan writes about that in one of his songs. He says, you know, Eliot and Pound arguing in their ivory tower. Now, so the baby boomer generation that Zappa and Dylan are part of, they're responding to the horizontal symbolism of the electronic age where you can't get the ivory tower position anymore. So they don't like the modernists, the Eliots, the Joyce, the Lewis, the Yeats, who are still standing off from the crowd and making these very complex epics. They don't accept their everydayness the way the baby boomers have to, because it's a bigger, involving environment that's very hard to have a perspective on or have a point of view. So both Zappa and Dylan are self-conscious about appearing to be the detached, nerdy intellectual like T.S. Eliot.
So they were hiding it then, what you're saying, Mom. They were aware of it, but they just took a different approach. In order to adapt.
Because the medium they were using determined that. You can't be a nerdy, detached intellectual in a rock and roll show. Imagine Jerry Lee Lewis stopping in the middle of his crazy piano playing and then lecturing on the grammatics of the trivium. or he goes into the quadrivium. You can't do it. He had to have his hair banging on. But here's what's funny. Do it. Zappa did do it. Zappa would, in the middle of a rock concert, stop and conduct. How nerdy can you get? He started conducting the rock band. You got to wait.
Speaking of that, I saw a video.
It's a joke, like.
Just a minute. No, let me just hear what Bert's going to say. You saw a video, what?
No, I saw a video last week of, there's a 10-minute video on YouTube, the best conductor ever of Zappa. And his hand techniques, he takes conducting to a whole nother level. I mean, I'm just used to the guy with the one, but if you look at his hand techniques, it's kung fu.
Yes. Yes.
It made me think of that when you played that piece earlier. I said I would love to see how he was using his hands to conduct that song.
Right. So now there's a documentary out. Roxy posted it. They just did it at Sundance. I mean, Sundance is usually in January, I think. And it's just excerpts of Zappa talking about all different kinds of things in different interviews in different phases of his career. And people are just blown away. One of the reviewers says, geez, you start to see that there's another Zappa there, this hyper nerdy, intellectual, learned fucking guy that has these incredible, sophisticated opinions that are totally inappropriate for pop culture, That comes out in this documentary. He's like a clinical scientist thinker.
Talks with serious composers, and he at the end was playing with the Ensemble Modern here in Germany. So he could mingle also with this higher culture.
Right. And he not only played off the vertical school versus the horizontal school, he also left the world of art and engaged in interviews. I mean, in politics, he didn't specialize as a musician like Stravinsky and them, or just remain composers, right? And they might be hinting at quadrophenia in their art, but Zappa drops music when the wall goes down. He even drops, publishing my interview with him, which he thought should be made into an album, and becomes a businessman trying to help Russians overcome the collapse of the wall, or the collapse of the Cold War. He's formed a company called Why Not to involve himself in helping Russians become capitalists, because he didn't want them to fall back into communism. So that's pretty good. And there are famous artists. I mean, Yeats went into politics. He became a senator in Ireland. But Zappa is engaging in he shows up in porn magazines. There's no area he doesn't engage in. What else did he do? Well, he would go into classrooms and lecture, but he would be ironic. He did a couple of educational videos. He definitely tried to not be limited to the role of a genius, the ivory tower genius. He was a people's man trying to become, like the Evergreen said, Zappa would have made a great alderman, a great city councilor for a city. It might have been over his head being a president, because you have to go through the Byzantine intelligence agency bureaucracy to be a president, because you have to connect with the past. You have to go and meet the historical figures. From them that you can't take the time to have someone learn that. You have to go through a kid whose father was a politician and dealt with these people in their career, and the kid was around and saw them and met them. You know what I mean? They knew the complexity of the political process. Now, of course, we are wiping out that complexity, which is the meaning of Trump. That Byzantine thing doesn't work anymore. too many bodies for people to stay in the organizing of the pecking order in a big brother situation. So here's the definition of apostrophe. The other definition, it says it is an exclamatory figure of speech. It occurs when a speaker breaks off from addressing the audience, for example in a play, and directs speech to a third party, such as an opposing litigant or some other individual, sometimes absent from the scene. Now, when the creator or the actor addresses the audience, that's a characteristic of Menippean satire. So this is another kind of leaving the audience, leaving the action of the play, and addressing something out of the context, which is slightly Menippean. It says, often the addressee, often what is addressed is a personified abstract quality or inanimate object. In dramatic works and poetry written in or translated into English, such a figure of speech is often introduced by the vocative exclamation, "Oh," letter O. Poets may apostrophize a beloved, the muse, God, love, time, or any other entity that can't respond in reality. So in Apostrophe the album, Zappa spends a lot of time addressing a dog called Fido. Okay? So it's almost like a symbol for Zappa is addressing the Android meme, the environment that's come alive. And
I also see it dog. The fight between personal freedom of expression against the authority, like
the tribal mandate, the group conscience.
They treat you like a small kid or like a pet, like a dog, like just obey. Here's
here's Zappa. He's doing
your entertainment.
Right. Here's your great horizontal, orgiastic, great music on emotional multitude music. But the vertical symbolist part of Frank, of his images, he's addressing you from an ivory tower position, that you're just an inanimate entity. And the dog is the symbol for Menippean satire for some of us. Because Diogenes was a philosopher of cynicism, and they talked about dog behavior. They addressed people as dogs. So it's very important that Zappa is addressing the Android meme, which is a Menippean object. The Android meme makes fun of the chemical body. And so it's Menippean what Frank's doing there. It follows the laws of Menippean satire by having the dog. And his Barking Pumpkin Records logo has a dog and a cat barking. So you have this interaction of the polarities of a dog and a cat. So
in the Middle Ages, there was a punishment when somebody was a rebel. They would make them walk naked or with the lights on the street, and the person, the rebel, had to carry a dog, and that was like the symbol of obedience to the Lord. That he would have to repent. And
he was being healed. He was being healed.
Yeah, he would carry a procession like the dog, like in a procession, and everybody will insult him through a stone.
Right, he's repenting.
Yeah.
Right, he was being beat over with a St. Louis slugger because he become a dog, which is what a healing is, and he got a good healing by the tribe, and ostracized and beat up and punished. The dog is.
And remember, everybody has to remember they have to obey. Like the pet, like the dog.
Yes. The dog is very obedient, is what you're saying. Everybody, if you get punished for not being a dog, for not being a tribal obedient figure, right?
Yes, you have to be loyal and obedient. That was like.
Yes.
You have no say on this. Stuff is not. You have to be. That's not your place. That's not your authority. That's not your function to say anything against.
And that
we don't care about your opinions.
Right, and that ruled in the horizontal, tribal, pre-literate, pre-individual, mass mind cultures. But when you started to write and read, you started to separate yourself from the tribe. And McLuhan quotes in Cliched Archetype that in the Middle Ages, the peasants would describe someone who could read as a guy with a hawk's beak or an eagle beak, like a very aggressive face or mask. When you were reading, you were really being antisocial. You know what I mean? You were leaving the tribal rhythms. And then the pretty first came in and dominated, so that all the tribal cultures around the world became captives of the eagle-beaked, literate civilization out of Europe, right? These crazy...
And then Antonin Artaud barks on the stage later on.
What'd you say?
Antonin Artaud.
Oh, Artaud, yeah, he become Antonin Artaud becomes a dog. Right. He takes the Gutenberg art form of theater, and theater it's a visual perspective. It's the audience is looking at something on a stage using your eye. It's multimedia within Gutenberg Galaxy, but radio and movies have created a virtual reality that obsolesces the detached eye reality, the Gutenberg reality of theater. So Antonin Artaud invented a new kind of theater. He called it the theater of cruelty. He was acting out how Gutenberg theater was ridiculous and useless. So he would put on a play, and all he would do was crawl around like a dog and bark. That was his play. He was showing how stupid it was to put on a play. And, of course, he became famous doing that and became avant-garde symbol for all kinds of art in the 60s, all kinds of theater. And, he's the one who composed the idea of virtual. In 1938, he called movies where he talked about a virtual entertainment. He used the word virtual. I don't know where he got it from or why, but the phrase virtual reality goes back to a madman who was doing, psilocybin, arresting him, putting himself in insane asylums every now and then just to regain some kind of composure. I mean, matter of fact, I have a new book. Sever Latrange, the guy who popularized all these French postmodern people with the semiotext series in the 80s, Dave Baudrillard and everybody that Roxy had to study 20 years ago in university, they were made famous by Sever Latrange, who was a French professor in the French department in Columbia. So he wants to get in touch with the art community, the village scene, and whatever is happening in the below 14th Street, New York City. So he meets Patti Smith and everybody and gets involved with them. And he starts the Semiotext series, which he modeled on McLuhan's Mediumism Massage, the little book I'm just reading from. He said he wanted to have a pocket book that people could read at lunch break, and have in their purses a little book as they were sitting on the subways. So his latest book, after doing this for 30, 40 years, is called Mad Like Artaud, A-R-T-A-U-D. It's a book about Antonin Artaud, and I learned he was an expert, or he studied as a professor, Artaud, because when I was at that postmodern conference in Banff in December 1997 that Sever invited me to, he did a lecture on Artaud, a detailed lecture like the way I would do McLuhan. So the back of the book says, those who are mad like Antonin Artaud, are they just as mad as he was? Madness, like the plague, is contagious, and everyone, from Artaud's psychiatrists to his disciples, to his family, to his critics, everyone who gets close to Artaud seems to participate in his delirium. Severe Letendre explores various embodiments of the shared delirium through what Artaud called mental dramas, that's in quote, mental dramas, a series of confrontations with his witnesses, or in other words, his fans. He would call his fans persecutors. A series of confrontations with his witnesses or persecutors in quotes, where we uncover the raw delirium at work, even in Severe Letendre himself. So Letendre admits that he goes mad trying to explain Artaud's madness. Okay? That's why it's called Mad Like Artaud. The author is mad like Artaud. So Mad Like Artaud does not intend to add one more layer of commentary to the bitter controversies that have been surrounding the cursed poet's work since his death in 1948, nor does it take sides among the different camps who are still haggling over his corpse. This book speaks of the site, or the place of Artaud, the meme of Artaud, where madness itself is simmering. So I bought this just lately. I haven't read it, but it looks interesting. But that's what we're talking about. That's Artaud. He went mad as an art form. And he was part of the Surrealists, the Dadists, very well-known artist in the 20s and 30s. He even had radio shows. But he became pretty outrageous and pissed a lot of people off. He just was a guy out of control. He was an early Ionette. Or am I exaggerating? Is any Ionette worth that? I don't know.
Maggie.
So I'm looking for... What?
He was a Maggie.
A Maggie, right. So looking at the table of contents, it starts off, the Artaud Affair. And the subtitle is, Was Artaud Christian? And it's called Intro Fiction. So instead of introduction, it's called Intro Fiction. Part 2, To Have Done with All Judgment. And it's an interview with Jacques Latremouille. I guess he knew Antonin Artaud, and the interview is called, I Talked About God with Antonin Artaud. I talked with God about Antonin Artaud. So I talked about God with Antonin, and then I talked with God about Antonin. And that's called To Have Done with All Judgment. Then the third chapter is Clinical Cruelty. Who is Dr. Ferrier? The Good Soul of Rodez. And that includes an interview with Gaston Ferrier. So I guess these are people that were involved with Artaud. And then the next chapter, All Paranoics. And the subtitle, False Witnesses. Interview with Paul Thevenin. Epilogue, Quiet Days in Ivory. A fictional interview with Antonin Artaud. So, 209, let's see what that is. 209. So I guess the fair... No, it's too detailed to read. I can't read that. But anyways, I'm looking forward to reading this book. Now, Sever, here's what Sever did. He was the husband or boyfriend or something of Kathy Acker. You ever heard of Kathy Acker, Roxy? She was the wild female top novelist, radical anarchist, post-feminist, whatever, of the 70s and 80s coming out of New York City. Kathy Acker is someone, a Maggie, she was a fucking crazy Maggie that all the kids have to learn in college, right? They study Kathy Acker. But she came out of Severe Letrenge's scene. And I remember when I was doing the radio show in the late 80s, this guy, a poet friend of mine, I half knew him a little bit, he said he went to the William Burroughs presentation in Toronto. So Burroughs came out, did his thing, and the guy, Greg Everson, he liked Burroughs, but he said some maniac woman came out, and she was god-awful, man. She was this crazy poet trying to be a female version of Burroughs, and it was outrageous. And I'd never heard of her, but I remembered the name. And then later, a couple of years later, I started to hear, holy shit, Greg hated the most famous woman of the 80s. So I thought that was interesting. So then, Kathy Acker, so when she died when I was at the Banff, Alberta, at the conference in December 97. Sever had to leave a week before, or he just came back. Like, he was just dealing with her because she got cancer, and she went down to Tijuana, and she was trying to do what they thought were all these crack therapies, and she died right around the time, or she died 2 weeks later. I could look it up and get the exact date. So I was talking to Sever about him dealing with Kathy Acker, and of course he knew a bit about Carolyn, but it was too late to deal with that. So he then got involved with this other woman, Chris Kraus, who's a well-known art critic of the 80s and 90s, who came out of the same scene of New York City's Lower East Side. These, post-punk, Patti Smith era women artists, wannabes, and so Sever told me that when he and Chris Kraus were invited to a bourgeois dinner party, and they'd be sitting there drinking wine with the bourgeois people, and then he and Chris would secretly start shifting the wine glasses around. So people unknowingly were drinking other people's wine, and they got a big kick out of this, of how they disrupted the bourgeois scene there. These are people who lived in crummy environments in the village, had no money, and just were used to, not bourgeois cleanliness rules. So now I just looked up Kathy Acker. She died November 30th, 1997 in Tijuana, Mexico. So that was a week before I met with Sever in Banff, Alberta, at the art school in the mountains that Greg and Ginny just skied. Remember they went to the mountains a couple weeks ago around Christmas? These incredible ski sites in the Alberta province, right beside British Columbia in Canada. The great skiing there. So she died November 30th, and I'm on a conference December 5th and 6th. So he had just come back from Tijuana, Sever was. And so now you have this Chris Kraus. So one day, I went to an art gallery, and there was the woman who Kathy, I knew that Sever and Chris, his girlfriend, new wife, whatever they were, had disrupted her dinner. They did this thing in her home at her dinner party. She was an art critic, one of these snooty art editors that Roxy has to avoid in Berlin all the time. These snooty, semi-academic people who use art for snobbery. So I proceeded to tell her what Sever told me he had done to her dinner party. And she was she wasn't shocked, but she kind of pretended she knew, oh yeah, I knew he did that. So that was that. I knew that's what Sever did. So on my trip in 2014, after seeing Roxy in Berlin, I went to Switzerland, and I smuggled myself into Sever's school. You have to be registered, you got to pay for it, but I would have told the story long back then of how I smuggled myself and pulled off 4 or 5 days. Every day I was there, some professor or something would try to get me kicked out because they knew I wasn't supposed to be there. But I showed up hoping Sever was there. I thought he'd be there, but he wasn't. He had left the week before. He had taught the week before, so I missed him. But I pretended that I knew all these other professors. So I winged it through, for about 4 or 5 days, got through, dropping Sever's name whenever I had to. But I knew someday they would call Sever because some of them were pissed out. What is Sever doing? What is Sever inviting letting people, Silver knows the rules. You don't do this. You don't have people dropping in. So I know that someday Silver would get an email, a phone call saying, do you know Bob Dobbs? Yes. Well, he caused all kinds of fucking shit there because he claimed you invite him there. And so Silver will be shocked, would be shocked when that happened, I assume. So in anticipation of when he got that call, as soon as I got back here, which would be the end of August 2014, I emailed Silver and I said, when you hear about me, just consider this, Silver. I was just shifting the wine glasses on the dinner table. I was just moving around. Do you know what I mean? In other words, what he did to the bourgeois dinner party, I did to his scene. I moved the wine glasses around so unauthorized people were imbibing the learning in the wrong rooms with the wrong unhealthy vibe or whatever you call it, and non-hygienic situation. So he never responded. So we'll have to see if one day I will find out. I will encounter the truth of how he reacted. I disrupted the bourgeois dinner table there. So isn't that neat?
Yes.
But I still respect his mind, so I'm going to read his book about Artaud. Because I'm sure Artaud in some way anticipated the outrageous life that I've lived. Remember, I was involved in the Kennedy assassination. Old Frank Zappa or Charles Bukowski, they can't claim that. Right?
You're a real mystic.
I'm a real mystic.
That is true. Real mystic. Real mystic.
Yeah.
That is right.
All right. So let's
timeline. In the timeline, you can see that.
Yes. On the you mean the diaries?
Yes, the diaries. Yes.
Right. But look up Kathy Acker, Acker. She's quite a phenomenon for the young kids out of suburbia in the 80s and 90s who they're literate, basically. They're industrialized, so they have to have some artist as a figurehead for their identity. And then they end up, if they get in the art world, they make art about what a fraudulent thing it is being an artist. That's what their art's about later. About the dilemma of...
It's only porno.
It's what?
It's the most obscene pornography. It's just...
Yeah.
It's not the real thing. Art is just not the thing. It's not it.
Yeah, it's kindergarten. They used to say that school was just for kids. Teachers babysat kids in school, all 12 levels. Well, the art world is babysitting, westernized psyche. Now includes everybody's psyche because the rest of the world went Western as a put-on. So the whole art world, and Andy Warhol acted it out. He acted like a babysitter. He'd just sit there in the factory and all these fashion people or stars would come by and he watched them act out their dramas and he just sat there impassive like a babysitter. So he acted out the babysitter fact of the art world. And we are the only challenge. We are the only, as I did with Roxy.
I thought you were going to say we are the only babysitters.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I am the final babysitter. Yeah. Iron is a babysitter. Yeah, I am definitely a babysitter. Just sitting around waiting for humans to get their shit together so we can soar into the impossible abyss. But what was I going to say? The artwork. So I did that video with Roxy a couple weeks ago about the media matrix metamorphosis or something, mediamorphosis.
Yes.
That's about the art world, defining art. And so what did I do there? I basically smeared the art world, but I just showed how puny it is.
The Gutenberg galaxy is dead.
Right.
The cloud.
Right. So that Iondom is the final or the new revitalized art movement. We are the art movement of all art movements in so many levels that we're not just limited to art. We're also the science movement. We're also the architecture movement. We are the janitor movement. We are the babysitter. We revitalize babysitting.
Yes, because what he's saying is art was just the representation of everything.
Right.
And it's not the real thing, and we are going to be able to create whole environments, whole worlds, and I mean, compared to that, art is really nothing.
Tiny. It's tiny. And you talked about the Emerald Canticle. What is a canticle? It's a hymn or chant, typically with a biblical text, forming a regular part of a church service. So Joyce is talking about his book as an Emerald Canticle. He's singing the laws of thought. What is it called? The Emerald Tablets. Is there another term for them? He's singing the Emerald Tablets, and he calls it an Emerald Canticle. Also says it's another name for the Song of Songs, especially in the Vulgate version of the Bible. So, Emerald Canticle is quite a mixed media term.
Yes, and something Ion is saying, all you're doing is the new song.
Right.
And there is also another thing with Ion that sometimes we don't hear the answer, or sometimes he disappears, but he claims he's talking to us all the time, but the rhythm and the frequency is different, so we have to sync to them again. So it's this music we are playing together. This conversation is the new song, and there is this thing that Zappa was doing with different rhythms playing at the same time, like 2 against 3, and very complex rhythms happening all together. Yes, and it's like everybody has a frequency and a rhythm, and sometimes that's why we cannot hear Ion, but they're actually there all the time.
Yeah.
And you have to think in.
Yeah, you're saying we have to sing the hidden frequencies. I actually got more information about the underlying frequencies in today's session with Ion. But, the frequencies, he calls them vibrational pulses. Finally get a new term. What do you call the things underneath subatomic particles, underneath our words? It came out, the new term is vibrational pulses, is what what we are trying to sing to.
Wow. Yes, and that's the most beautiful thing for me is he's telling you there is some music inside you, in your molecules, in your cells, all these rhythms in your body.
Right.
You are music.
And music is a term from mortar to indicate beauty, to indicate for the little man something glorious. But the actual music is more than glorious, or it's not on the emotional level. It's a different kind of percept than your emotional fun.
In Zappa and Joyce and you and Ion, everything is a vortex around music. Everything is...
Yeah. Vibrational pulses, which are not limited. It's not limited to music or sound. It's vibrational pulses. Damn, that's a good one. For some reason, the static. Did you notice that? Or was that just my phone? The static took over the song?
No, it's the Finnegan's Wake.
Right. So the song is still clear for you?
No.
I don't even hear it. How come I stopped it, right?
There was a lot of white noise.
Yeah, white noise coming in. Anyways, what an awesome performance, though. Did you pick up that much?
Yes. I was saying Joyce took the apostrophe away from the Finnegan's Wake and gave it to Zappa.
Yes. Excellent pattern there. Yes. That's nice. Nice one. Let's see if Bert. Is Bert disconnected? I think we got to bring Bert. Is that you, Bert? Yeah, that's Bert.
Yes.
Okay, so what we'll do for the Zappa hour, I realize we better delete the Nelson thing. Nothing dramatic happened that I could exploit, so we will delete the Nelson portion of the Zappa hour plus, so that people will not be subject to what we just heard. So we must fill in a few more hours of stuff to equal our annual.
There is a lot because another thing that I suppose Zappa would admire from Joyce, that he said that was a real guy.
Yeah.
Is the fact that the Ulysses was prohibited in America for 10 years. There was a big trial because they said it was pornographic, and usually they were presenting to the media things for children, 8-year-olds. They said it is because they want to protect the younger ones, but in a way it's actually a way of keeping the population uninformed. And Joyce not only changed literature, but it changed a lot of much more, like this the laws for the liberty of expression, that Zappa was also fighting a lot for this freedom of expression. And the trial for the Ulysses lasted 10 years, and it was not allowed in America. If you took or bought a copy of the Ulysses, it was taken away or destroyed, but it was not allowed in the country.
Right. Exactly. Now, are you citing Ben Watson's article where he compares Zappa and Joyce and the similarities in their lives and artistic efforts?
No, just to the beginning, the thing when he asked why do you say James Joyce is one of your big influences? But
right.
Maybe if you have the whole article.
No, I don't.
Go into that.
No, I don't. I do have his book. I think you've quoted most of what's available. I could check that later, but I'm just, no, wait a minute. You're quoting the book. There's an article on his website, militantaesthetics.com, which goes into the similarities. So I didn't send that to you?
No.
Okay, we'll have to do that next week. There's a long article where he goes through, starting off, they're both Catholic. They're both lapsed Catholics. And then it goes from there. So there's a lot of interesting similarities. Okay, so let me check what you sent us, Roxy, your emails.
Yes, we could maybe listen to a song by Joyce.
Okay.
It's called It Adieu, Lit Adieu. And I think it's the only song we have by Joyce, but he did much more. And as I said before, he was playing and studying music all his life.
Right. That's right. He went to the opera every night, kind of thing. Engaged in the music world a lot. Lobbied for musicians in different, political difficulties. Yes, he didn't forget his involvement as a musician. So, and many people say, Phineas Wake, in the end, I don't know what it's talking about, but I just listen to the words as music. So for a simple interpretation, a lazy interpretation, and simple is is that he represented the musician against the book, and he turned the book into music. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
He was of the ear faction, which Wyndham Lewis did not appreciate. Wyndham Lewis being the I faction. Okay, so you're talking about, you say, Zappa apostrophe. James Joyce took the apostrophe away from the original title of the song, The Fin Is Wake, to make it universal. No more single fin, all are awake in progress, part of the conceptual continuity of Bob Opus Re Magnus. First version is Zappi Jr. Second Zappa live in New York. So those are two Zappas. And then you have Composed by Joyce. That's the one you're talking about, right? Composed by Joyce?
Yes, I think it will be nice because many people think he was only a great writer, but he was also a great musician.
Right. Okay, so I will bring on the sound. That, get rid of that. impressed.
Yes, he was a tenor. He played the guitar and he played the piano.
Awesome. That was pretty good.
And, I think
That's
one of the... I don't know the name.
The song? Just a second.
No, the voice, the singer.
Okay, let me bring it up.
But I think one of the greatest things that he achieved...
The song is called Bid Adieu to Girlish Days. Bid Adieu to Say Goodbye to Girlish Days, sung by tenor Kevin McDermott.
And that's the Cantus number 5 from the chamber music poems.
That's not music. I would read it, correct?
Yes, you have the lyrics.
Right. So Joyce, there's another YouTube, The Rhythm of the Words. What's that one?
Well, that's the... I think it's somebody talk... like many musicians were inspired by Joyce, because one of the things he could do, he could translate the music in his words, in his writing. This rhythm it's very musical.
Right.
And there is a YouTube where Joyce himself is reading, I think, from Annabella Cruella.
Yeah.
And Olivia Cruella. And there you see the musicality of the words.
Yeah.
But this musicality inspired a lot of artists, serious composers and pop composers to make songs like Kate Bush or Led Zeppelin. Because another thing in the traditional music of Ireland, they have music that is nonsensical, because they have very old songs from the time of the Lost Tribes. But nobody knows what they don't know what they mean.
Right.
So it's just like listening to sounds like but very beautiful songs. And I suppose because he knew that type of music, that was maybe the source to create the Thunderwords.
Right.
These words that say a lot and are also onomatopoeic. They have the sound, for example, of the thunder. And maybe you could also read the thunder words to show the rhythm,
you recorded
the musicality.
You recorded.
Yes.
Can you play
those?
I
recorded you, but I don't have them here to play them.
Okay. You say, you wrote to me, there are different styles of traditional Irish singing. Some are nonsensical. Both singing, lilting, often accompanied by clapping and foot-step dance. The dancing is part of the musical as percussion, like in tap dancing. Features such as rhythm and tone dominate in lilting. The lyrics thus are often meaningless or nonsensical. Because of this, translations from Gaelic often do not exist. So what is this? I'll click on this YouTube.
That's just an example of that type of singing.
Okay, let's hear. Is he going to do it a bit? Let's see. Everybody was obediently listening. She was rather passive and going maybe too conscious.
In a way, doing that, it's like angel talk. Just like,
right. Do many cultures have Gaelic singing? Do you think it's Gaelic?
Yes, but many songs, they don't have the translation, so nobody knows what they really mean. It's just like nonsensical.
In English, yeah, you can have nonsense songs in English, but the words are translatable. So that's pretty rare to have a song that can't be translated, doesn't have any words, or they're doing instrumental. You're doing an instrumental? Okay, so the next item is poetry. So Joyce's first book of poems is called Chamber Music. And Roxy kindly typed up one, Cantos 5.
No, that's the one we already listened to.
How did we listen to it?
Yeah. That's the lyrics, if you want to.
I never clicked it on. Let me see. No, that's Sid Barrett of Pink Floyd. We didn't listen to that.
Okay, that's another of the poems of the chamber music.
Yeah, his first book of poetry, I think, 1907.
Yeah.
So the lyrics, well, Sid Barrett is the original, maybe founder of Pink Floyd, who did too much LSD or something and disappeared, left the group and was a lonely kid after that. Now he does something here. Let's see what he does. Golden Hair, Sid Barrett, 1969, words from James Joyce's chamber music. Oh, second. Okay. Okay, I'll read the lyrics just so we know what we heard. Lean out your window, golden hair. I hear you singing a merry air. My book was closed. I read no more. Watching the fire dance on the floor. I have left my book. I have left my room. But I heard you singing through the gloom. Singing and singing a merry air. Lean out of the window, golden hair. So it's about giving up books. I've left my book. I've left my eye.
The end of the Gutenberg galaxy.
Yes, and I will enter the trance of the electronic ear. So there's that, and then
Yes, there has been a lot of in serious music and also in popular culture. I could not open the Oratorio by Cage.
yeah, I couldn't open it. I could try it, but Joyce had a big influence. His books had a big influence on painters and sculptors, not just on musicians or writers. He influenced all the arts.
Yes.
He probably even had an influence on advertising. And the what?
The laws against obscenity and freedom of expression.
He actually created a political freedom. He loosened up the laws of censorship. He actually contributed to an opening up of culture from the 19th century restrictions. So, Bid Adieu, we listened to that one. this chamber music poem, Bidadoo. That's the one we listened to. Okay. It says, Bidadoo, adoo, adoo, Bidadoo to girlish days. Why is a guy saying, Bidadoo to girlish days? Happy love has come to woo. Happy love has come to woo thee and woo thy girlish ways. The zone that doth become thee fair, the snood upon thy yellow hair. That's what Germaine made. Didn't she make a snood, her clothing? When thou hast heard his name upon the bugles of the cherubim, begin thou softly to unzone the girlish bosom unto him. What's that? Is that porno? When thou hast heard his name upon the bugles of the cherubim, begin thou softly to unzone thy girlish bosom unto him, and softly to undo the snood. That is good. He's feeling her up. He's saying that the end of the girly days is when the girl gets felt up, to use the old phrase. And softly to undo the snood, that is the sign of maidenhood. Okay, we did that. And then, look at that. Roxy wants me to do the thunders again. It would be wonderful if you say them alive again, Bob. Today is Thunder Word Payday. And she has a YouTube.
Yes, who knows what repercussions they have when you say them. No, because
that's true.
Because of the rhythm of the word, it sounds, it's really musical.
Did it sound musical when I did it the other night?
Yes.
All right. That encourages me. I will. Let me do one little song to make me feel drunk and good. So, what could we play to make me feel? Let's just check.
There is also Joy's favorite composition by Gluck, the Dance of the Departed Souls.
That's his favorite composition?
Yeah.
And you want me to play that?
Well, I mean, we could.
Okay, so we got here. I'm looking at the chat line, which I haven't looked in hours. We got Pamela writing up a storm. They're talking. What is this? There's a lot of discussion. Well, I'm going to go back up to the end. Jean says, Frank Zappa, Finnegan's Wake, Omnium Gatherum. Oh, so she posted the essay by Ben Watson on comparing James Joyce and Finnegan's Wake. It looks like. I mean, James Joyce and Zappa. And then Jean pointed out the pillar and the cloud was mentioned. You see, there were many ionic themes mentioned by Nelson. The pillar and the cloud. Now, on the surface, listening to Ion, people years ago used to say, well, he's a religious fundamentalist guy. But Ion, as we've heard through the years, uses these themes variously, the pillar and the cloud. But they are things in the Bible, but we listen to it differently. We've been mutated by Ion. We wouldn't say the kind of things that Nelson says. Wouldn't even take that interpretation. Silly. So, Gene says, bummer. No timing for Bob on Costa. So, they're now mourning that I didn't get on. Gene says, the first commercial on Payday, auto insurance. Then they have a headline, Bob's up next on Coast to Coast. Then Gene goes, crap, commercials again? More commercials? Arrgh. Then she's telling me, get ready to talk on Coast to Coast, Bob, they're back. So she was coaching me through this. And Gene says, yes, now we know why we are lactose tolerant. I don't know what that means. You telling me to download the PDF of Nelson'sTravelTalkers.com. Joa says they are back. Are you? Very dead air. Roxy, tell us a story. I hear you, Bob, so I guess that was a dead air point. Then Gene goes, good grief, another commercial break on Coast to Coast, but they're going to open the lines for calls next. Now, that's the point. They really rub in the commercials. We're not used to that here in Ascended Continent, are we? We're not used to hearing these nauseating beckonings for money. Robert says, what's the story, Roxana? Can you talk about Egypt's manor? What is Egypt's manor? Gene says, I'm listening to the Coast to Coast program. I'm going backwards through Gene's comment. I'm listening to the Coast to Coast program on a local radio station. I expect to hear Bob ask a question any moment now. Well, that turned out pretty disappointing. I hope she survived that. She's asking if I hung up and called in. Robert says the sea cucumber and the Egyptian inflatable banana. As we move closer to a state of Israel, river of tears and advertisements. Gene, message the host. Welcome to Fast Blast, where you can send one message to tell me how to email the guy or text him Coast to Coast. He gives the details, telling me to call in. Pamela. Okay, Pamela says, if there's no more babies being born and nobody ascended is aging, is everyone just young adults? And she says, unless said young adults choose to bring forth a child in some other manner, and she says, or that my ascended being is having, but no longer requires it, having BTDD, you don't know what that is, no longer requires it. He says, how does such a creation work? And gives a link. So, Trina says, hey, Bill, if you're there, where do I go to make a donation? I've looked all over your webpage and don't see it. Earlier, Trina says, we don't have to flit into the other world. The whole wide world flows to you. That's only apply to me, Trina. Hey, no world flow to you. It flows to me, right, Bert?
Yes, Bert.
Yes, it flows to me. Even Trina's world flows to me. The world doesn't notice you, Trina. It flows to me. It doesn't even see you. I suck everything out of everything.
About that
lactose intolerant?
The lactose tolerant comes from the milk. That comes back to the explanation from Wanda was explaining that they did a DNA test and the Hebrews were cow herders and they drank milk. So she connected that. And they determined that the DNA sequence of those who were descendants are lactose tolerant. That comes back to that Nelson Fall.
Yes. Yeah, Nelson said, he says, well, I'm not Jewish. For anybody that knows Nelson, he's a blatant Jew. He sent his kids to Jewish schools, and they did the Jewish thing, bar mitzvah and all that. So he means, I think he would say, well, we're not from the tribe of Judah. We are Israelites, or maybe he would name, he said he was a Levite, a Cohen. So I guess that's what they call themselves. But he used to confuse people. I'm not Jewish, he'd say. Everybody knew they thought he was Jewish, so it caused a lot of funny confusion. And then Robert says, when are you going on the Nori show again, Bob? Well, I never was on there. Carolyn was. So a lot of instructions to me how to get on and when the schedule's going to be. So everybody was trying to help. They're talking about is Ion coming back. Eliza, I hope he comes back. Good. I like it when people get a chance to ask questions. Trina says, Bob said maybe in the morning around 10 o'clock your time. Eliza said, yes. Last week they surprised by coming on during the Bill hour. Trina says, that's cool. All the more reason to call in. Okay. Eliza earlier goes, was Ion here already? And Trina says, hi, Eliza. Yes, he was here. She goes, oh, fudge. Eliza missed Ion. How did that happen? Alyssa gives a link to Johnson. Okay, we're up to date on that. So we have to get back to Zappa work. So why don't I finish the interview I was reading last week? That would get us into that. Or is there anything else to play, Roxy? We've done all the materials, right?
Well, maybe Joy's favorite composition by Gluck, because it's the myth of Orfeo and Eurydice. Orfeo goes to the Gulf to look for Eurydice. Mm-hmm. She's dead, right. And by playing so beautiful, he moves the gods to tears, and they allow him to take the spirit of Eurydice, but they tell him he shouldn't look at her until they are back in the world of the living, and then he cannot resist, and he looks at her, and she falls down in the Gulf again, and he is then left alone. But in a way, it's like the power of music could even defeat death. And maybe that's what I am saying about these tones under the
cell.
What was the
cells? Underneath the cell.
The pulse of frequencies.
Vibrational pulse.
That's the music of Orfeo, the thing that can defeat death. And we can go back home.
I ain't going back home. I'm going forward. Luckily, we go in circles, so I will arrive at home. But if I have the illusion I'm going forward, I'm happy with it. I'm not turning around, going back home.
Well, we can go somewhere, nowhere.
As long as it's in a circle. But I didn't get much of what you were saying there. Do you want to explain it again? What was your theme?
Well, Orfeo goes to the underworld to look for the soul of Eurydice.
Right.
And he plays so beautiful that he moves the gods to tears. And they agree to let the soul of Eurydice go back to the living. But they tell him he shouldn't look at her until they're back in the world of the living. But he cannot resist. And he looks at her, and she falls down into the Gulf again. But
so what's your point?
Music can defeat death, and then that's why I was talking about this pulse.
That's what Ein says. Music is mortar for the little man. It's comforting concepts, but the tones, the sensations are pretty pleasurable, regardless of semantic content. I mean,
yes, and he makes us expand in our concept of music. Is this pulse? Is the words? Is the new song? It's the music at all levels, in the molecules, in the cells, in our speech.
Right. Does this seem musical? copying it, but what do you make of that kind of music, Roxy? What does that speak to you? How does that speak to your educated ears? It's called Soft and Gentle Waves by Clyde King. So it's the fourth time I've played it today. What do you think of it? Is it too early for you, or are you getting the basic emotion from it?
No, actually, I don't
It's nice.
really like that.
Isn't it? Did you just say it was nice?
No.
You don't like it. You don't like it. Weird. Why? What's wrong with it? Too blurry?
No,
High fidelity enough?
Maybe it's the alignment of the planets, but I'm in a very, very, very romantic mood. Like,
oh, you're in the mood for this.
Yeah.
You can actually play that.
More impressionist, but it's also very beautiful.
Right, and you can actually play that, right?
Yes, I'm learning that.
Yeah, now, what is it about Clyde King that doesn't make it? Am I nuts for liking that stuff? Have I been programmed into a rabbit hole?
No, but maybe I need a little more complex melodies. Like if you see this arabesque, how the arpeggios go up and down, and it's always changing. It's not like the same thing all the time. It's like waves and very...
Right. You're watching the fingers. I respond to a sentiment or an emotion in this rhythm and blues. I'm not looking for complexity or weaving multiple levels. It's the emotion. What's that? What am I listening to? What am I responding to?
Arabesque is probably the music, the voice with the music.
Yeah, I like the tonality.
Blends with the tone. Yeah.
It's okay. If you like it, it's okay.
No, I'm not making an argument. I'm just trying to figure out why I like that. Debussy is pretty good, arabesque, but it stays too much in the tinkering piano timbre or something. So let's play this a bit. I think this is a tremendous song by that great new jazz guy, Kamasi Washington. Let's see.
Yes, played last week.
Yeah.
Final Thought.
Kim called in. What?
It's called The Final Thought, or Final Thought, or something. It has thought in it.
Well, there were several I played.
Kamasi Washington. Okay.
Yeah, Kamasi Washington. And Kim called into What News and praised Henrietta. And I really liked Henrietta, so I was listening to it again last night. So listen to this. This has some of your variety, maybe. Did that appeal to you, Roxy? Oh, maybe she got knocked off.
Well, it was getting good with the sex.
Right. And then they stopped. You objected to them stopping the sex. Yes. Is Bert? No, Bert's here. Okay, so Jean took an excerpt from Ben Watson's Zappa Joyce article. So let me just read this. She posted it. It says, more specifically, Zappa and Joyce are cultural subversion cranked up to multi-speed, where impediments to the artist's megalomaniac will to put anything next to anything have become a persistent itch whose scratching rends the body of the work so it longer works. Or it maybe means no longer works. So it no longer works. It's all over the place. But what a place. Both were medievalists contesting a puritanical, rationalized, logico-commodity system imposed by the Protestant work ethic. He's got Protestant worth ethic. Reacting against repressive Roman Catholic upbringings and schoolings, but saving the good part, the yearning for a universal world picture. But instead of an inert ecclesiastical myth designed to prevent the masses noticing their change, Zappa and Joyce turned the rosy, plastic, holographic wonderment of the Chartres Cathedral effulgence into a gargoyled beast at the beck and call of any man or woman brave enough to walk by his side. It hisses at cowardice and snarls at censorship and sniffs at repression. Are you that? Actually, there's a correction. It hisses at cowardice and snarls at censorship and sniffs at repression, electrically sensitive to the bullshit surrounding social oppression. That's Ben on the overall dynamic of Zappa and Joyce. Their cultural subversion cranked up to multi-speed. So, what do you think of that? Any comment, people?
Yes. I think they both had these mystical experiences, like Ian told us Joyce was going to mediums to try to understand what was going on. He worked a long time on the wake, and he couldn't really understand what he was doing, but he could not stop this waking progress.
Yes.
And Zappa is always making jokes about the cosmic debris and all these world things. But actually, I think he was contemplating all these things very seriously.
Yes, I agree. Now, Anonymous. I'm blinking Anonymous. Is that Alyssa? Is Alyssa hanging out here?
No.
Response.
No.
What's your name? Oh, that's Debbie. Debbie. Wait, did you have a question for
by the
Debbie?
way, I like the music you played. That was really nice.
Well, my heart is warmed.
Yeah, I love all of it. All of it.
Cold Boston is so receptive to my vaginal acoustic insertion. Did you get that, Deb? Did you hear that word, that unruly word, inappropriately inserted into it?
Just break you.
Anarchy right in our ear. What do you say, Deb? What are you learning tonight, Deb? Of course, it's easy to like the music, Deb. But what are you learning? You self-muted yourself. Check your phone. Is your boyfriend beating you up now, Deb? Bert, have no concern. I think Deb's being beat up. I think her boyfriend heard what I said. And she's being pummeled. Yes,
baby. It just seems that Frank was really, and maybe I'm partial due to my exposure to Frank more so than Joyce, is that Frank to me appears to be more mystical because he was self-taught, and to me that's it seemed like he was being guided by like what we learned from